give me patience, yeah.
Yeah, what's up, Z-Pack? It's Sunday. It's your boy ZDoggMD. We are live and direct out of Z Studios. I got my boy Tom Heineber, Logan Stewart. We are going to talk today about something that I think has many ramifications, not just for patients and physicians, but for the entire healthcare system as a whole. Not only is it a canary in the coal mine of what's going on in healthcare in the U.S., but it has many sort of predictors to how we might better build 3.0 in a more equitable system for everybody. And that is this idea of rich people paying an ish ton of money to get access to the best and the brightest and the doctors that enable this. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Listen to that echo. What's going on there? That's Tom Heineber with his phone.
Sound issue, you're good.
Oh yeah? Logan, can you hit up the article title so we can see this? There it is. The doctor is in. Copay? $40,000. And I think this picture is interesting because it frames an emotional element. Throw it back up. It frames an emotional element for the article that actually isn't really what the article is about. And it shows a rich and kind of haggard woman in a limo coming out and cutting through the line of a bunch of other people who are presumably not rich, who are waiting in the emergency department, and all the medical personnel holding the door and umbrellas for this rich person. So let's talk about this, let's unpack this. So this article was interesting. When I read it, it was sent to me by several Z-Packers, and the first thing that caught my eye was, of course, the $40,000 copay, because at Turntable Health, when we were trying to build this model of health 3.0, we took away the copay entirely, and we made it a flat fee for unlimited all-you-can-treat access to the buffet of care, and that fee was $80 a month if you were an individual. But more patients came through an insurance company that paid the fee on behalf of the patient if the patient had that insurance. So it's a little bit different, right? But is it really? So what the article talks about, what caught my eye was that
AZ, real quick.
Yeah.
There was a Facebook audio issue for some people, so if you could just briefly summarize one more time.
Let me summarize one more time. So what we're talking about now is this idea of physicians and clinics, concierge boutique medicine that serve the ultra rich. Is this okay? Are the doctors selling out? Is there some ethical concern, or is it more indicative of what's going on in medicine as a whole, and is there a place for it? That's what we're talking about on today's Against Medical Advice. And by the way, this show is our technical deep dive into some aspect of medicine. It's not as unstructured as incident reports. So join us for the ride, and we're going to take your comments as well. So the article caught my attention largely because I recognized almost every physician that was mentioned in this article. I went to school with some of them. Others were my colleagues at Stanford, and still others I've had phone calls with, because we all inhabit the space of trying to make healthcare better in some way. And so actually, Logan, can you pull up the image? There we go. So let's leave this image up for a second. And for the people on the podcast, it shows an image of 4 physicians sitting in a nice office. And right in the front, it says Blackbird Donald Bird. So clearly aimed at some kids as well. Now, this is the staff of Private Medical Services run by Dr. Jordan Schlane, who's the gentleman sitting in the green chair. Now, Jordan and I know each other. We've had calls. And the article talks about services that doctors provide for the ultra wealthy at a 5-figure fee per year. So it may be $10,000, it may be $40,000, it may be $100,000, and for that year you get access to a physician who is going to basically take care of everything for you at a level that you would never receive as a normal patient in our system. And this raises immediately a lot of people's elephants. They're sort of unconscious, will say, wow, like this isn't fair. Why should rich people get to cut like at Disneyland when you get fast passed or front of the line, or even worse? There was a thing going on a while back where disabled individuals were selling their services where they would accompany a able-bodied person for a large fee because disabled people get to go to the front of the line. So these sort of services where you have a lot of money, you can spend it to basically screw everybody else and get to the front. So these sort of services in private medical services is a group in San Francisco that I'm familiar with. And again, Jordan and I have talked, and one of the doctors, let's show that picture again, Logan.
The first one?
Yeah, that first picture. There it is. So the lady in the back, cross-legged, she is Dr. Lila Alpers. She was in my group at Stanford. She's UCSF trained. She was a hospitalist, and she left my group to join this group after a little bit of time at Google, actually. And I will say this, and both Jordan and Lila in particular, because I worked with her in the trenches at Stanford for years, is one of the smartest, most caring, has one of the greatest senses of humor, just a wonderful, amazing physician. So here's a question, and Jordan is amazing too, although I don't know him as well. And one of the things that Lila told me when she was leaving is she wanted to take care of patients in a way where she could actually spend time. She could use her training at the top of her license and provide amazing world-class care. And she felt like there was just too much volume, too much administrative responsibility, too much paperwork to be able to do that in our standard system. Now, how many of us, ZPAC, who are on the front lines, feel exactly this way? Now, when these docs split off and set up a service where you have to pay a lot because you want to keep your volume and your census down so you could provide this amazing level of care, there's a big part of us guys and a big part of me that goes, good for them. When the system is so abhorrent, it's so fundamentally broken that everything feels wrong on your daily basis, where you're pretty much treating a computer screen, or you're treating the bean counter in order to get paid, or you're treating the insurance company, to have an option to go, you know what, no, I'm gonna have fewer patients and give them everything I have and still make the same income or more income. Why the hell wouldn't you do that? So that's the pro. And seeing that Lila is there, I go, dude, she is good people, right? Now, here's the con. And the con is a big one. These are rich, affluent people. And I know Lila, and I know many other people did not go into medicine just to serve the ultra wealthy. So what gives here, Tom? Like, why would this happen?
You tell me.
I'm going to tell you right now.
Why would it?
I'm going to tell you right now. Because we go in with that idealism, and then we're met with a system where we can't serve the poor, let alone the rich, or anybody in our current system. And when that system is so dysfunctional, if you're a smart person, you did a lot of training, you're a creative person, you went in and you wanted to change the world, you were a little Hannah Montana going, I'm going to use my Disney powers to change the world, and then you find that you're just a twerking Miley Cyrus by the end, right? What's going to happen? If you can find a way to do it, you're going to do it. And if that involves taking care of people who have the means to actually give you an income and have amazing care, that's what ends up happening. Now, the downside again, Tom, is that we want to provide this kind of care to all our patients. And the fact that we are unable to do it makes me say, okay, I flirted with this idea. Should I be a concierge doc? Should I come? And when I moved to Vegas, you guys, I'm not going to lie to you. Tony Shea, who invested in Turntable, when we were brainstorming early solutions, he said, well, one thing you could do is you could just make ZDogg videos as a thing, since you're passionate about that, and you could be a concierge doc to me and my very successful internet friends who all are self-made billionaires and millionaires, and we were willing to pay $20,000 and $40,000 a year to have unlimited access to an amazing Stanford-trained doctor who will come on our private jets, and if we go on vacation, they'll come out there and take care of us. They'll get us to the front of the line, the ER. They'll get us the best specialists. They'll take care of our families. And there was about a second where I flirted with the idea, and then the problem is, and I wish I didn't have this problem, I actually want to do something to transform the system, and it felt hollow to me personally to give that up to try to just take care of this small group of people. Now, I am not criticizing people who choose to do this. In fact, I'm complimenting them because they found a way to practice medicine the way they know they have to. And if it has to be for that population, it's the only way they could do it. And I know that Lila still takes care. I mean, she is one of the most compassionate people I know. And that's why when I saw this article, I said, I have to comment because I know these people. And I know people are going to read this article and they're going to get upset and they're going to be judgmental on both sides of this. The extreme capitalists are going to say, good, if you work hard and you become rich, you deserve special privilege. And then the egalitarians are going to say, no, we should treat all patients equally, right? So the first thing I want to do is talk about these doctors and say these are very, very good doctors. Now, that being said.
Real quick comment by Andrew Wilson. He says, isn't this literally Health 3.0 just for a specific population?
Yes, that is exactly what it is. This is personalized, collaborative, relationship-driven, preventative care, right? And who gets it? The ultra-rich. Now, that's a perfect segue in what I was going to say, which is that's what's fundamentally disgusting about this whole thing, is that everybody should have some access to at least a simulacrum, some simulation of this level of care. And it isn't hard. And you know why I know this? Because we did it at Turntable for $80 a patient, which still isn't dirt cheap, but it is way cheaper than $40,000 a year. Now, did we fly around on private jets and get them to the front of the ER? No. But would we send a health coach to the hospital if they got admitted? Would we be in their business and in their lives in a relationship-driven way, taking care of them, focusing on prevention? Yes. So we can do this. It's not just for the rich, but these kind of organizations are showing us a way to do this. Now, I want to get into the nuance of this because it's actually more complicated than that. Can you show me another, the next image, Logan? Okay, this guy here, leave this image up for a second. I want to talk about Harley Matlis. This is Dr. Matlis. Harley and I trained at Stanford together in internal medicine from '99 to 2002. Harley, I believe he trained at George Washington for medical school. He is one of the smartest docs that I know. He is detail-oriented, thorough. He cares deeply about his patients. And this is what happened to Harley. And I'm going to tell this story because he's not here, but I don't think he would. I don't think he would object. So Harley worked at Menlo Clinic in Palo Alto, and it is a fantastic clinic, a really beautiful clinic run by Stanford. He had 20 to 25 patients a day, and he treated each of them like they were his family. And in the end, he would call me just like, oh, it's really, really hard to provide the level of care that I want to provide, and I'm still making X, and I still have X loans, and when he made the decision to go to MD Squared, which is a concierge medicine company that's mentioned in the article, it was a difficult decision for him, but when he did it, he really never looked back because he found he could provide the kind of care that it was in his DNA to provide. This really intense, relationship-driven, detail-oriented, thorough, treat the whole person kind of care. So Harley's another example of a really good doc burned out in our very broken system for a long time. It's like he put in his time, right? I did 10 years at Stanford. I think he did about 10 years at Menlo and really worked hard. And that is a fantastic clinic, and it's still very hard. So for him, that was a really good fit. Did we have any other pictures, Logan? I forget. Yeah. Was that everything? Let's throw up one more. All right. Now here's the freaking downside, people, of concierge medicine.
Looks like a hotel room to me, Z.
Doesn't it? And how many of us, Z-Pack, have talked about turning hospitals into hotels to please the administrators and please HCAP scores and Press Ganey and all of that? Now, go back to that image. There is a part of my elephant that wants to just throw that table over and start breaking everything in that room, because this is a hospital, not a hotel. But this is the type of hospital rooms that are aimed at the very affluent patients that are part of these sort of groups. Now,
it's like when Jesus caught them gambling in the church.
Exactly.
Flipped over the table.
Do you remember what he said? He said, "My temple should be a house of prayer."
Okay, that's from Jesus Christ Superstar. That's not from the Bible.
That's not in the Bible? Oh my gosh, my entire worldview just got rocked, Tom Heinerer, because everything I know about the Bible I learned from Jesus Christ Superstar. That's a bumper sticker. Anyways, the idea that we are kowtowing to this sort of pure patient experience, the question is, for these affluent patients who cut to the front of the line because they're rich, okay, are we having audio difficulties?
Static.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're going to fix it.
Give me some check.
Check 1, 2, we're checking audio. We have equipment issues, my friends. It may be Facebook, it may be Wirecast, it may be something else. We don't know. We don't care.
Sounds fine.
We're going to bring you the truth.
Afton says, what's the company we need to complain about to your audio? That would be
Facebook.
Logan.
Yeah, Logan. Logan Co.
Complain directly to Logan's
Now, honestly, this is
personal
an
Facebook.
intermittent problem with our audio that comes up only every third show. We cannot figure out what it is. We've talked to everybody. Nobody seems to know what's going on. So we will fix it at some point, but it will take a little bit of a while. Gary Goodman says, guys, wake up sound. Okay, so anyway, so back to this. This idea that really affluent people cut to the front of the line and get this experience, is it actually harmful to them? Can you, Logan, can you pull up the last article? Yeah. So here's Prince. Now, this article, VIP syndrome. Why do doctors to the stars make fatal mistakes? Let's look now at the dark side of, and we're just going to power through the audio because this will, if you're having trouble with audio now, you can watch this on the replay on YouTube and it'll be pristine. There's something about the interface with Facebook that garbles our audio. The dark side of concierge VIP medicine has been well documented over the years. And part of it is this idea that doctors, nurses, healthcare frontline people, administrators treat people who are rich or who are VIPs or who are celebrities differently than they treat normal patients. Ideally, we take a Hippocratic oath, we treat everybody the same. But in this case, we really aren't. And Stanford was a great example of this. And Prince, so I mean, in this article it goes through like a bunch of different things, but in Stanford what happens is if you're a VIP, if you're a big donor to the organization, they kind of keep it hush-hush, but you get a red blanket when you're admitted to the hospital. Now, in the article for the New York Times, they talk about this red blanket, and I'll tell you, we experienced it. And they say it's very subtle, it's kind of a way of acknowledging what the person has done for the organization as a donor or as a important person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is abject horse crap. Because the way the frontline providers and caregivers saw that, at least everyone I talked to, is, oh crap, shh, that guy has a red blanket or that woman has a red blanket. So be careful because administration's going to be up in our business, patient services is going to be up in our business. So maybe don't do that rectal exam even though you're worried about bleeding. Maybe don't check those vitals in the middle of the night even though the patient's not entirely stable. Maybe everybody walks on eggshells and does something different. Maybe we get a guy who's a senior attending who hasn't done a lumbar puncture in decades to do the lumbar puncture because the patient wants the most senior person to do it. This is called the VIP syndrome. People, it is real AF. People die from VIP syndrome. And some of the great examples that have been given are Elvis, who got a ton of pills from his doctors and died. Prince, who may or may not have gotten opioids and fentanyl and ended up overdosing, and that's still controversial. Joan Rivers, which is a much more subtle, nuanced case, because what happened with Joan Rivers was this. She was on the table, I think, for a GI procedure and was getting sedation. And the docs were so starstruck, or the anesthesiologist, whoever was doing the thing, they were taking pictures with her. They were clearly not on their A game from everything that we've heard. Now, again, I'm not there and I can't judge, and doctors in glass houses and all of that. But the idea that maybe being a celebrity had been a problem, okay? And, you end up, Steve Jobs. Here's an interesting example that's given in the article, right? So Steve Jobs had widely metastatic pancreatic cancer, all right? Now, when he was first diagnosed, there was all kinds of Western stuff that he could have done, but he insisted on kooky stuff, nutrition, vegan diet, fruit, all this other jazz. And his doctor, that's one of his doctors, Dr. Agus, who was quoted in the article, big cancer guy, data guy, said, look, a lot of his docs were kowtowing to him and saying, sure, you can do tiger, unicorn, tears, and this and that. But he refused to do it. He said, no, that's just not good medicine. And my oath is really to protect you, not to do what you want. The medicine you need, you think you need, is not necessarily the medicine you actually need. And so he said, Steve Jobs fired him like 10 times. And each time Steve came back, called back 10 minutes later and was like, okay, so another thing. Because Steve knew that this guy knew what the hell he was doing. So celebrity VIP syndrome, right, can be a dangerous thing for the patients and a dangerous thing for the doctors. Look at Conrad Murray, who killed Michael Jackson with an innovative home use of propofol. He's a cardio, what the hell is he giving propofol for? He can't do monitored anesthesia care at home. So here's a, now by the way, all signs point to Conrad Murray just being a really shitty doctor. So everybody I've talked to that knew him in training is like the guy was a two-bit clown the entire time. And of course, he loses his license in California like ASAP. He keeps his license in Nevada until the bitter end because, hey, Vegas, baby, right? That's the kind of people we attract. So that all being said, treating rich people or celebrities like they're different is a fraught and perilous sort of thing. So that being said, so we talked about Jordan, we talked about Lila Alpers, we talked about Harley Matlis, these doctors that I know that are in the article that are amazing. These are high-end VIP patients that they're taking care of. And I've talked to Jordan about his practice, and he says, he has a quote in the article, Tom, where he says, people ask me at parties, what do I do? And I'm like, I'm an asset manager. And they're like, oh, really? Tell me more. Is it bonds? Is it pork belly futures? He's like, no, it's bodies. I take care of our most important asset. And first of all, Jordan, I want to say, if you ever say that again publicly, I'm just going to have to slap you because that is so douchey. That's douchey. But it's also true because that is what he's doing. He's taking people who have the means and he's actually providing them really, really high level care. So if you need a specialist, you're going to be seen. Now, the downside, now, this is where I want to get into some personal stories and some comments. Now, Tom, do you have anything to add in the meantime?
Yeah, real quick. So this is Vegas. I know for a personal fact that Dana White won't let any female UFC fighter be seen by an ER physician when they have fights here in Vegas. He has plastic surgeons come in and take care of them. So what I'm asking, I guess, is why is the ER so bad at doing stitches that you have to have a plastic surgeon do those stitches?
Oh, this is a great segue into the story I was going to tell, Tom, because this is one of the perceptions in the concierge community, and some of it is based in truth and some of it isn't, that you always need somebody at the top of their game doing every single procedure. And this is a fallacy because a lot of people can do sutures. Now, facial sutures, if done correctly, a great emergency doc can do them without a lot of scarring. But here's a story, Tom, that happened to me. And physicians, nurses are guilty of VIP syndrome with themselves. So here's the story. Little Z-Pup, she was 1 year old. We had a nanny back in the Bay Area because you needed one because both me and my wife were working so hard as doctors that we had no time to raise our own freaking children, which, by the way, still hurts me deeply inside. So we got a nanny who was great, raises the kid while we're at work, then we come home and spend time with the kid. Now that's all changed. Now we spend a lot of time with our kids, but this is what happened. The one time I'm home, I had a day off, I'm with the nanny. The nanny kind of says, oh, Dr. DeMagna's here, so he can play with little baby Nina because he's a doctor, so he must be safe. So I, being an idiot, and being a guy and being me with ADD and no impulse control, she's bouncing on the couch and and she bounces and bounces and bounces, flies right off the couch, hits her face on an uncushioned end of a coffee table because you know what? Doctors are the worst patients and we didn't childproof the house right, and gets a nice, maybe it was about a centimeter lack for a little 1 year old, right? Bleeding everywhere, screaming, crying. And I'm like, ah! And immediately, my first thought was, oh shit, I'm gonna have to go to the emergency department, and I hate that place more than anything in the world because I work there. And so what I did was we took her to urgent care at Palo Alto Medical Foundation where I worked. I didn't take her to Stanford. I took her to urgent care, and Mrs. Dog met me there. She came back from Stanford where she was working as a radiologist. We met at the thing, and the urgent care doc was not a pediatrician but a family doc, and steri-stripped this thing closed. Now, it looked pretty good, but there was part of me that was like, you know what? I don't trust this urgent care doc on my beautiful daughter's face, and if it leaves a scar, oh my God, I will never forgive myself. And I was already feeling so guilty about letting this happen to my kid, right? And so what did I do? I go, thank you, doc. I was really polite. We signed everything, paid the copay, because got to pay the copay, doesn't matter who you are. I took her right upstairs, found the plastic surgeon that I knew, Dr. Mazer actually, and he was kind enough, he'd finished his day and he was getting ready to leave, he'd clicking the boxes in Epic, and I said, dude, this is my daughter, I'm just worried she's gonna get a scar. I mean, they saw her in urgent care, this is what they did. And he was fantastic. He said, you know what, this is okay, but if you really wanna be sure, I can put in a couple of quick little sutures and it'll probably heal maybe a little better, but it's hard to know. And I'm like, do it. Oh my God, my poor kid had to get stitches, right? This really aggressive intervention when a steri-strip probably would have been fine. And she still has a freaking scar. Either way, it's very tiny. I call it a beauty mark because I have to assuage my guilt. And so here's the question. Did I do her a service? No. Did I do myself a service? No. Is this a common scenario with the VIP syndrome? Yes, we end up doing a lot of stuff or not enough stuff. So here's the sort of punchline. Can't we just get it right for as many people as possible? Can't we build a Health 3.0 system that treats everybody with fairness as if they were a family member, which staffs our nurses up and our doctors up to be able to do that, which pays us based on actual outcomes that matter, that take into account patient accountability and adherence, that focuses on prevention and an equitable distribution of care, and then the very affluent people who want that extra stuff are welcome to pay for it, because this is America, and if you want to do that, you can. And doctors who want to practice that type of medicine are absolutely able to. But if we can't provide basic care for everybody, then we're failing as a society. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have care for the affluent if they want it. That's what happens in a lot of countries. But we got to get the basic care right, and we got to lower the cost of that basic care. Then this argument of we can't afford it goes away. So let's fix that. Tom, thoughts before I go to comments?
Christina Seifert says, such a joke. Everyone deserves to be treated the same. Anyone that is honorable will do what is necessary to help and not expect anything in return.
I think that's a very difficult statement. I think it's true in a conceptual way. In a ground level way, people who've sacrificed their 20s, who are drowning in student loans, who are basically suffering with too many patients, and these are nurses, doctors, pharmacists, everybody on the front lines. It's very easy to say that conceptually, but then when you get down to it, we're just burning them out. So the question is, we got to fix the system so we can do that for everyone without wasting resources, without the inequality that we see. It can be done, and we don't have to go to a communist system. We don't have to go to a pure capitalist system. We just have to get the model right, and then we can figure out how to pay for it. My own take, we need a universal coverage over which private entities fight for how to actually provide the care in the best way. And that way, people are covered, but you have private industry actually innovating and being private. Now, I don't know if we'll ever get there. Tom, is it okay if I read some comments from earlier that people left? Because I really like them.
Let's do it.
All right. Nicole Mondock said, aside from the ethical issues, I'm curious about the patient outcomes. Studies have shown that high patient satisfaction correlates to worse outcomes and higher readmission rates. Is it really possible to provide objective and appropriate care to a client? As a nurse, I don't struggle with making decisions that my patients may be unhappy with if it's medically best for them. My paycheck doesn't depend on their happiness, though. This is $1 million question in our current system where our paycheck does partially depend on creating a hotel environment, on an experience, on giving the patient what they want, not what they need. Part of the title of what we did today was like, hey, do you want that, do you want opioids with that? Your bill's $100,000, $40,000, do you want opioids with that? Anything to make them happy. I have seen, and there is no excuse for this behavior. I have seen concierge doctors right here in Las Vegas who give out Ativan and Xanax and Dilaudid and all this stuff like candy to keep their patients happy. And this is not, it's not uncommon in regular family practice internal medicine, but it seems to be enriched in the concierge space in certain upper echelons of it, and that's unacceptable. So we have to give the patients the care they need, and that need is determined through collaboration with them. We talk to them, we figure out what are their hopes, dreams, and fears, and then we treat to that goal with our expertise, with their partnership, if they're willing to be partners. If they're not, we have to start holding them accountable. That's part of what we did at Turntable. We would actually discharge patients from the clinic if they weren't willing to play with us together. And it's hard to do, and we don't all have that luxury to do that, right? Concierge docs, one of the groups in Menlo that I knew, they would screen the patients so hard. It was like getting into college to be a patient in their group, because they didn't want patients who were asking for inappropriate narcotics and Xanax and those kind of things. They wanted patients who would work with them as partners. It was tricky, and there's ethical issues around that, because remember, guys, Medicare funds a lot of graduate medical education in this country. So even though you have loans and all that, the government did pay for some of your education. So the question is, do you owe them something? If you're going to treat people for $40,000 a year, an individual, should you do a day in a homeless clinic, or do a medical mission, or do something like that? These are valid, pertinent questions. Now the question of patient satisfaction correlating with quality is an old one, and it's pretty much been answered. The higher the patient satisfaction, the worse the outcomes. So it tells you something about what patients want and what they need, and tough love, the nature of tough love. John Werschels says, as a nurse, Are we not guilty of some of the same things? When my wife had a miscarriage, she told me that she had vaginal bleeding and was on the way to the hospital. I already had her OB-GYN on the line and was waiting in the ER. The ultrasound tech was called in for a stat vaginal ultrasound and was waiting. The OR team was told to stay because they were going to likely do a DNC in an hour. All of this was done and ready before she even walked in the door. So are we as providers, as caregivers, not guilty of the same thing? Absolutely. And that was the story I told with my daughter. So here's a question. In a perfect world where everybody gets really good science-based, outcomes-driven, collaborative, relationship-based care, do we need this? Disneyland, great example. Fantastic magical kingdom. You still have to stand in a hell of a long line. And rich people will pay fast pass to get to the front of the line. So the question is, should that always be allowed? Is it ethical? And I leave that to you, Zeepak. Mary Beth says, that's nice, but risk analysis studies show that physicians with any amount of experience are prone to mistakes if they do not routinely experience emergency scenarios. Is the doc the best if he hasn't set a broken limb in the ER in a decade? Probably not. And I see this in the concierge space. And in fact, I remember a story, this is a great story, that a neurologist at UCSF told me when I was a medical student. He was a world-class migraine expert. And Ferdinand Marcos, the former ruler of the Philippines, I don't think he's covered by HIPAA because he's dead and also he's Filipino, so who cares, man? This is the USA. So this guy tells me this story and he says he's the world expert. He was flown to the Philippines to see actually it was Hawaii because he was in exile. See Mr. Marcos. It was after he'd been removed from power for a headache. And he determined that Mr. Marcos needed a lumbar puncture. And he said, let's get someone to do a lumbar puncture. And Ferdinand Marcos said, no, that's you. And his wife Imelda of the 2000 shoes was like, no, it's you. And he was like, I haven't done a lumbar puncture because I'm an esteemed attending physician in decades. But he did a lumbar puncture on Ferdinand Marcos because there was no way he was going to get out of it. Now, is that the best thing? He said he nailed it, got a champagne tap because he's a hero. But is that the best thing? Again, VIP syndrome. Thoughts, Tom?
Tough question.
Yes.
One of the Z-Pups is having an emergency. You have some money from being a doctor. You can pay money to get them out of this emergency faster. Do you do it?
In an instant. This is your child. And I think that's what a lot of the people that were interviewed, the rich people in the article, were saying. If I have the means to do this, isn't this the best use of my money? You could buy cars, you can buy houses, you cannot buy your health back, you cannot buy your child back. So if you fear for your child, would you not spend their money? Now remember, these are not people who are educated in health, they're not doctors.
Right.
So they're like, if I throw a bunch of money at it, maybe it will save my child or get them better care. And that's how I felt when Z-Pup got her thing. I'm like, oh my God, here I am with all this medical power, and I'm feeling helpless, like I'm gonna take her to the best, plastic surgeon I know. Somebody I would never go to for myself because I don't care about that stuff, but for my daughter. And so this is a normal human response. I don't think we should be judgmental about it. I think we should say this is who we are as human beings. We try our best for our family, our loved ones, people we care about.
Consequently, though,
yes.
Do you feel guilty in this hypothetical when you do that?
I still feel guilty about doing it for Z-Pup for her lack because I think I caused her harm. And and the first doc who did the steri stripping did a fine job. It would have been fine. Not only that, but I tortured my daughter. So she had to go through stitches at age 1, which sucks. It's painful. And I will never forget like the screaming and all that, because the problem is like when it's your own daughter, I always am advocating against empathy. I'm always advocating for compassion, love in the face of suffering in a detached way. You can't do that with your child, people. With your child, it's empathy. You put yourself in her shoes, you feel her pain, you feel terrible for her. So it still hurts a bit. But everybody's different, every situation's different.
The comments basically here all boil down to rich people are evil, keep your hands off my money. Those are the two sides of the divide on this, right?
What's your elephant say on this?
My elephant says that some rich people are evil, but most rich people got their money by actually providing services for other people. You don't get money without doing a good job and helping people.
Yeah.
Most of the time, unless you're on Wall Street.
So I'll give a good example. So Tony Hsieh, he's my friend. He was an investor in, so all the disclosures, an investor in Turntable Health. He's a billionaire. One of the most generous, authentic, sincere people that I know. He worked his ass off to get rich. Nothing was handed to him. And he still works incredibly hard. And he has a concierge doc, but he never really, he's always quite authentic. And I think There are rich people who behave like jackasses, just like there are poor people who behave like jackasses. And we've all encountered all kinds, and I think painting everybody with a brush like that is difficult. Just like the doctors in this article, the last doctor that I forgot to mention, Rex Chu, Dr. Rex Chu, he was my Stanford attending. He worked at Stanford Medical Group for many years. He burned out seeing so many patients, the increasing administrative paperwork, the feeling that he just couldn't take care, and his patients love him. He switched to a concierge model. Now, what happens when you're the patient of a doctor who then switches to concierge? I've had many people message me and say, my doctor abandoned me, went concierge. I can't afford $1,000 a year or $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year, but this was the only doctor who understood me. And this is hard, and I will tell you that doctors struggle with it, and they often actually keep a couple of patients, even who can't pay, because they are caring people. These are not bad people. And just like the patients, they're not bad people. Listen, if it were an issue where they were depriving someone else of necessary care, and you had a story about Peyton Manning, right?
Walter Payton.
Walter Payton.
Walter
Well,
Payton.
Peyton Manning's still alive.
Walter Payton had liver disease that he was going to die from. I forget which one. And he was put on the transplant list with 12,000 other people. And he refused to move to the front of the list just because he was Walter Payton. He was a famous running back for anybody who doesn't know. And he died while waiting for his transplant. And now the NFL has an award called the Man of the Year Award named after him because he's an exemplary human being.
Now, it's really hard to understand how the liver transplant list works, and if you have money, could you really move forward? And this is very controversial. I'm not going to dig into that, but I'll say this. Steve Jobs got a liver transplant for the cancer in his liver. And I will tell you another thing, because I don't know if it's a HIPAA violation, but I was at Stanford whenever Steve Jobs was treated there, and I will tell you, he was an asshole. So he would literally kick people out of the scanner and be seen. And there are ways to do things and there are not ways to do things. So if you are costing somebody else's health because of your affluence and you're pushing people out of the way, I don't care what a hero you are, and Steve Jobs is a hero to me because of what he did with Apple and the way that he treats the consumer as the person that you're actually working for, right? He gives them what they need, not what they think they need. In a way, he's one of the best doctors of all time for that space, right?
I want to read this comment because I think this is partially at the heart of the issue. Mark says, most wealthy people inherit their money. Few have a great idea, great work ethic, and luck, and make a lot of money. That's not true, Mark. 80% of America's millionaires are first-generation millionaires. Most families lose their money by the second generation. But I think this is at the heart of the issue, that they're getting better care, and they don't deserve it. They didn't, so what if you are a tech billionaire who created a great service for somebody? Do you deserve a higher level of care?
Well, these are valid questions, but here's a better question. Don't we all deserve a higher level of care, and why aren't we working on that? So here's my admonition to everybody working in any space in healthcare, and that includes people in the concierge space. Do your part to shine a light on what we can do to actually build Health 3.0 for as many people as possible in a transpartisan way where we take all viewpoints into consideration and build the best possible outcomes-driven, relationship-based, preventative-minded, holistic system we can build. And then these questions will become less and less relevant. Because if rich people want to get little bells and whistles on their care, fine. But if you're paying to survive versus a poor person dying, that's not okay.
Yeah, when I think of rich people healthcare, I think of like bullshit Reiki treatments and things like that.
Well, right. It's Gwyneth Paltrow.
That's a bell and a whistle.
It's Gwyneth Paltrow. Like if you want to shove a hornet's nest in your vagina, which is what's going on now, then by all means, spend your money on that garbage. But we're going to fight it tooth and nail because it's not science-based. Here's another comment. Michelle Giardino Glanville. He does make a good point about how education is tiered, so why isn't medical care? And this relates to what you're saying, Tom. I work in emergency medicine and I treat our VIPs exactly as I treat regular patients. The thought that people can and do buy their way ahead of the line enrages me. I see people arrive and demand a plastic surgeon to fix their 1-inch forearm laceration. This is true. Some of it is ridiculous. Sometimes you do need an expert, and my doctors, nurse practitioners, and PAs are not cavalier, and they will refer up, and anytime they don't feel they can do what's needed. Most of the time, though, an ankle pain can be managed with rest, ice, compression, and elevation. You do not need the head of Children's Hospital Boston Orthopedics to tell you rest, ice, compression, elevation. Rice. This is absolutely true. And again, this is a function of like wasted resources, drawing people away from potential and needed care. But again, it is a tiered system, just like everything in the US and in other countries. In Canada, you don't think people with a lot of money, they come to the US and they get their specialty care. So this is a thing. One more comment here. Rich people, says Tracy Davidson, have been getting these type of VIP services for years. It has a name now. And it has a storefront now, but it's been going on for years, right? Now it's called concierge medicine, boutique medicine. As much as it may feel unfair or wrong, it doesn't necessarily make it wrong. It's a service just like paying for a concierge service on a Disney cruise. The slippery and potentially problematic issue will arise when a rich person cuts in line and someone dies. Paying for a luxury maternity suite is just that, paying for a super expensive room where people cater to you. The problem comes in when a rich person's emergency becomes more important than a poor person's emergency. That should never happen. And I think that's a good way to wrap this cast. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, let's wrap it and let's go into a tribe talk on wider healthcare inequality. What do you think?
Let's do it. All right. Tune back in. We're going to do Tribe Talk. It's going to be uncensored. We're going to talk hella smack. Share this. Be a part of this Against Medical Advice Health 3.0 movement with your voice. Thank you for joining us. And we out.
1, 2, 3. Just give me patience. Yeah.